The ACCC has received a number of extremely concerning reports about very high pricing for rapid antigen tests. Many of the reports are between $20 and $30, which is concerning. And then we've had reports, a number of reports of well above $30, which of course is just beyond outrageous. The wholesale prices we're hearing about are anywhere between $3.95 and say $7 to $8. Sometimes those prices go up to $11.45, but you can see when the bulk of the wholesale pricing is between say $4 and $8 that the pricing between $20 and $30 is extremely concerning, and as I say, above $30 just beyond outrageous. We are writing out to, or we have already written out to, a range of chains to get them to explain their pricing, and we're also writing out to individual stores to get them to explain their pricing. Some individual stores within chains are pricing at very high levels, and we have a large number of reports of them doing so. And so we're very much looking forward to what their explanations are for the very high pricing that has been reported that they are selling their goods at. Often some of these high prices are from stores you wouldn't expect: petrol retailers, tobacconists, some convenience stores. So we're very much looking at those as well as pharmacies. We've had reports of some outlets not issuing receipts or demanding that payment be made in cash. There's only one reason why I would think outlets are doing that, and we need to remind people that it's actually illegal not to provide a receipt if asked for purchases of $75 and above, so we're looking very closely at that also. We've also had reports of companies or outlets selling packs designed for wholesale at a retail level. Now, some packs are designed, for example, to be only used at medical facilities with trained operators, but they are being broken down and sold at retail. Not only are we looking at that, but we're sending those complaints off to the Therapeutic Goods Administration. We've also had reports that look as if people have bought the goods at retail and then sold them at more than a 20% markup, and that is illegal under the government's recent announcement, and we're referring anything that looks of that nature to the Australian Federal Police. We're also looking at specific instances of misleading conduct. I had a letter over the weekend from Minister Hunt pointing out that he's aware of some outlets saying that where supply's been paid for, the supplier's saying, no, we can't provide it to you because the government's requisitioned it or diverted it. I'm assured by Minister Hunt that that's not true, and therefore statements like that would amount to misleading conduct. So a range of very concerning pricing. We're looking at the reasons why outlets are doing that. We have an eye to naming and shaming, but we're also looking at whether the conduct could amount to unconscionable conduct, and we're also looking at what's being said to see whether consumers are being misled, as well as, I say, as referring matters to the Therapeutic Goods Administration and the Federal Police in appropriate circumstances. So a lot going on. I'm really hoping that companies hear this message and adjust their behaviour very quickly so that we get sensible pricing for all Australians as fast as possible. Happy to take questions, thanks.
I guess the issue, obviously one of the issues that you've outlined is the fact that there are medical grade products being broken up and being sold to individual pharmacies, maybe one or two in a pack. I mean, isn't it just a supply and demand issue? Isn't it better just to get these products out to as many people as possible? Because people need these to, say for example, send their kids back to school. Maybe they're seeing that, sure, the markup aside, isn't it that's just better to get it to more people?
Well, look, clearly we're facing a supply issue that's driving the price issue. There's no doubt about that. More supply is needed. We keep being assured that more supply is coming, both from government agencies and the private sector organisations. Clearly we need more supply. But when you have rapid antigen tests that are designed for use by trained professionals, and they are being sold, and also being sold without proper instruction, that is extremely concerning, because people may take comfort from a test that they didn't know how to perform properly, and that, I think, is an even worse outcome. So we're looking at those matters, we're referring them on to the TGA, and if people are found to be doing that, appropriate action will be taken.
What penalties could businesses potentially face, particularly if they're found guilty of that unfortunate conduct?
The penalties under Australian consumer law can be the higher of $10 million or 10% of turnover per breach, whichever is the higher. So the penalties can be extremely high, and if we found large stores and chains engaging in this sort of behaviour, we won't hesitate to take action, and the penalties would be very large. Where it's individual stores, we still may take action, but of course they're of such a size that the penalties, they'll be very painful for them, but of course they'll be of a lower level.
How much should people be paying? I mean, what's a fair price for one of these tests?
It does depend on a complex supply chain and on the circumstances, but as I say, we're seeing pricing at the wholesale level that's averaging between, say, $4 and $8. Really, I mean, anything beyond 100% markup, you'd have to say, is beyond the pale. But we have heard stories where people have gone to enormous lengths to get supplies for their consumers, and on those occasions maybe higher pricing can be justified. So that's why we're writing out to people, that's why we're giving them a chance to urgently explain what they're doing and what justifies the pricing they're charging, and when we see that, we'll be taking action. Now, in the earlier run-up to this period, we of course were seeing prices at about $10. I'm extremely hopeful that once we get the supply at the levels that we need, that we'll get back to that pricing of $10 as an appropriate price. But as I say, right now it does depend on the circumstances, but with the majority of wholesale pricing between $4 and $8, some a bit higher, you'd have to think 100% markup is, beyond that, is very hard to justify.
We've heard a number of stories on social media about the federal government potentially intervening, taking supply. Are you 100% confident that this isn't happening? Because it's not just retailers who are saying this. There have been companies suggesting that the federal government has intervened and taken their supply of rapid antigen tests.
Well, 2 points. One is I can only go on, first point, I can go on what's in Minister Hunt's letter, which says that's not happening. But secondly, when we find individual instances, we can see exactly what's been said and trace that down and see whether that's true or not. So I understand there are reports of that. Sometimes it depends on what's exactly being said, but we're going to look into those instances when we come across them and see what the truth of the situation is. I'm sorry? Oh, look, I think it's a bit hard for the government to determine who can or can't sell a product, but it has to be said that the tobacconists, the convenience stores, the petrol stations, people who you would not normally expect to sell these products, are doing a fair bit of it, and that's where we're seeing the highest pricing. But, you know, we only get the reports of people who are concerned about high pricing. I've no doubt there's sensible pricing at some of these outlets as well. So I think let's just focus on when people are behaving outrageously, no matter who they are. But certainly there's been some concerning reports from some of those smaller outlets. But I have to say, we've also had concerning reports from some pharmacies, and so they've got a bit of explaining to do as well.
Are you concerned about the number of scammers that seem to be out there targeting people that are really desperate for these tests?
Oh, look, we spend an enormous amount of our time dealing with scams, and whenever you have a situation like this where there's a lot of need for something, inevitably you're going to get people setting up a scam who don't deliver what's paid for, had no intention of delivering what's paid for. So we're trying to keep on top of that as well. And obviously if we find the scammers, we would be more than delighted to take action. But really the main thing to do is get out and warn people just to be very careful, particularly when you get unsolicited contact suggesting that someone's got a product. That's when you need to be very careful. If you're the one who's initiated the contact, that's a lot more safer environment.
When can we expect the ACCC to take action against some of these rogue sellers? Next week, next month?
Well, next week we'll be in a position to have assessed what these companies are saying to us. Obviously we need to do that. We can't be acting without hearing their side of the story. But certainly I would anticipate that we'll be mentioning some companies that are doing what we see to be the wrong thing very soon. Obviously when you talk about taking a company to court, that takes a lot longer. So that's why I've always said here, naming and shaming, getting messages out is the fastest way to get those prices down. But if we have to take court action, we will. But obviously taking someone to court, there's a lot of work that goes into that, so that takes a lot longer. And we want action now. We want prices down now, because Australian consumers should not be paying ridiculous prices for a product they desperately need in the middle of a pandemic.
Could you give us an example of some of the retailers you've been in touch with? Who are we talking about?
Well, we have been in touch with retailers such as King of the Pack, they're a tobacconist chain, Metro, which are a petroleum chain, but also all the main pharmacies, the supermarkets, but with King of the Pack and Metro, some of their stores have had a lot of reports of very high pricing. Now, to emphasise, most of their stores we've had no reports about, but some of their stores we've had a lot of reports about. So I think you can assume we're writing to everybody of concern, but most of the individual stores that we've had most reports about of extremely high pricing are the tobacconists, the petrol stations, the convenience stores, and on some occasions pharmacies.
How do you do that? Do you have officers that go in there and buy them undercover, or do you just go by hearsay?
We take this in a number of ways. Our first port of call is to assess the reports that we get, and we get a large number of reports. We try and watch those reports to make sure we've got accurate information we can rely on. When you get a number of reports saying very similar things, then you know there's some veracity to it. We contact the supplier. Beyond that, we can do a range of things. That can include sending staff in there to buy things and see what they're told and see how they're treated. So once we have heard from them, all sorts of actions are possible. We certainly do send people to stores.